The order was given on the 14th of August, at 2:30 in the afternoon, in the kitchen yard of Ashfeld Park, by a man who did not look up from his horse's bridle when he said it. He said it to his steward, Mr. Crail, who said it to the housekeeper, Mrs. Voss, who said it to the girl herself, at the kitchen door, with the particular face of a woman delivering an unpleasantness that is not her own. The girl's name was Maren Coll. She was 21 years old. She had been hired 6 weeks before at the Aldwick hiring fair for the harvest season, same as her father before her, same as the 4 men from the village of Stern, who were at that moment in the north field with their scythes. She was told she had done nothing wrong, and that she was to take her wages to date and her bundle, and be gone before the sun touched the elm at the west end of the park, which was the local measure of sunset, and which gave her perhaps 4 hours. She said, "Yes, ma'am," because there was nothing else to say to a housekeeper in a kitchen yard. Mrs. Voss went back inside. The kitchen maid, who had heard it all from the scullery window, went very still behind the glass. Maren Coll picked up her bundle from the bench where she had set it that morning, and walked round to the front of the house, and stood in the drive, and looked at the elm, and thought. To understand why a duke would order a girl out of his harvest before the corn was in, you have to go back 3 weeks, to the evening of the 26th of July, to a field called the Long Acre, and to a thing that was seen by the wrong person. The Long Acre was the furthest field from the house, a long flat run of wheat that caught the evening light and held it until nearly dark. The harvesters worked late in that field because the weather had been uncertain, and Mr. Crail said every hour counted. Maren had stayed after the others because she had found a line of stalks that had gone down in the last rain, and she meant to finish them before morning. It was that kind of care. She had been raised to it by her father, who had cut this same harvest for 30 years before the fever took him, and she did not know how to do a thing by halves. The Duke of Ashfeld came through the gate at the far end of the field, at 7 in the evening, on a grey horse, alone, which was not unusual. He rode his own land every evening before dark. What was unusual was that the horse put a foot wrong on the soft ground at the edge of the drainage ditch, and the Duke went over the side of him and did not get up at once. Maren Coll was 12 feet away, with a sickle in her hand. She reached him before she had decided to move. He was on one knee in the ditch mud, with his left hand pressed flat against his ribs, and his face the color of new ash, and he was breathing in a way that told her he was deciding whether to be sick or not. She crouched down in the mud beside a duke without ceremony, because ceremony did not come to her naturally and had never seemed useful. "Where?" she said. He looked at her as a man looks at something he did not expect to find in a ditch. "Left side," he said. "I believe something has moved that ought not to have. Can you stand?" "I am about to." "That was not what I asked." He looked at her again, differently. He was perhaps 32, dark-haired, with a face that had not recently had any softness in it. He was not a man who was accustomed to being asked what he had not been asked. "Help me up," he said. She helped him up. She was not a small woman. Her father had been a large man, and she had his reach and his steadiness, and she got the Duke of Ashfeld out of a drainage ditch in the Long Acre at 7 in the evening, without dropping him or making a ceremony of it. He stood in the field with his hand at his ribs, and caught his breath, and looked at her. "You are one of the harvest women," he said. "Maren Coll, sir. My father cut this field 30 years. Coll." He turned the name over. "Edward Coll." "Yes." He said nothing for a moment. The horse had righted himself, and was cropping the edge of the ditch without remorse. "I shall walk back," he said. "You will not say anything about this." It was not a question. "No, sir," she said. He walked back through the gate, leading the grey, not quickly, but steadily, the way a man walks who is deciding what his pain means. She finished the fallen stalks in the last of the light and went in to supper. She said nothing about it. She said nothing about it for 3 weeks, through morning after morning of cutting, through the heat of late July, through the 3 days of rain that stopped everything and drove the harvest men into the barn to mend tools and argue about the weather. On the 12th of August, she passed the Duke in the stable yard. He was with Mr. Crail, going over a list of something. He looked at her once without looking at her, the way a man looks at something he has filed away, and went on talking to his steward. On the 13th of August, she was sent to the house to help Mrs. Voss with the linen, because the third housemaid had gone down with a summer cold, and the rooms set aside for a shooting party needed to be made ready. Maren went, because it was not her place to say where she was useful. She was carrying a stack of linen down the east corridor at noon, when a door opened and 2 men came out of it talking, and one of them was not talking to the other, but to the air in front of him, and what he said was this: "The girl from the ditch. I cannot have the whole county knowing I was pulled out of my own land by a harvest woman. Crail, see to it, before the party arrives." The door closed. Maren Coll stood in the east corridor of Ashfeld Park with a stack of clean linen and her own heartbeat very loud in her ears. She finished the linen. She carried it to the rooms. She folded it with exactly the care it deserved. And at 2:30, Mrs. Voss came to the kitchen door. 4 hours is not enough time to do everything, but it is enough to do the one thing. She walked the 2 miles to Stern in the afternoon heat and went to her mother's house, which was 2 rooms above a glover's shop, and sat at the kitchen table and told her mother the whole of it plainly. Her mother was 51, a woman who had raised 6 children on her husband's harvest wages and a very narrow margin, and who listened to a thing through to the end before she spoke. "You are going to Mrs. Al," she said, when Maren had finished. "I thought so too." "Tonight?" "Before sunset," said Maren. "I have my wages. I have enough for the coach if it has not gone." Her mother looked at her for a long moment, the way a woman looks when she is checking a piece of work. "You did not deserve it," she said. "No," said Maren, "but that is not what I am going to do anything about." Mrs. Alley was her mother's oldest friend, a widow in the town of Carwick, 12 miles east, who took in plain sewing and taught the piano to the daughters of tradesmen, and had a spare room and a character of granite. She had written once to say that Maren was welcome in that house whenever the world required it. Maren had kept the letter folded in her father's Old Testament for 2 years. She took the letter out and put it in her pocket with her wages. She was at the Aldwick coach office at 20 minutes past 5, and the Carwick coach went at 5:30, and she was on it. The shooting party arrived at Ashfeld on the 15th of August. There were 9 of them, 4 from London, 2 from the north, a baronet from across the county, and a colonel who had been at school with the Duke. They shot for 3 days and drank for 4, and said several things about the harvest that were incorrect. On the second evening, the baronet's wife, Lady Pell, who had not come to shoot anything, and was therefore paying attention to other things, asked Mrs. Voss at dinner whether Crail had replaced the third housemaid yet. Mrs. Voss said they were managing. Lady Pell said she had heard in the village that a harvest girl had been sent off very suddenly, and she hoped there was no unpleasantness. Mrs. Voss said there was none. The Duke of Ashfeld, who was at the end of the table discussing drainage with the colonel, said nothing. That night, after the party had gone up, he walked the long acre alone in the dark. He did it without a lantern. He had walked that field in the dark since he was 12 years old, and he did not need one. He walked it 3 times. It is not known what he thought about, but when he came back through the gate that she had been 12 feet from, he stood in it for a moment, in a way that his head groom, going past with a lamp, thought was unusual enough to remember. Carwick was not an unpleasant town. Mrs. Alley's house was narrow and warm and smelled of beeswax and the river, and there was always something on the stove. Maren found work within a week. She was not a woman who waited. She had her father's capacity for turning up in a place and being useful before anyone had formally agreed she should be, and by the end of August, she was keeping the accounts for a grain merchant on the market square who had 3 shops and the organizational habits of a weather vane. She kept them in a hand her father had taught her, small and exact, every column balanced, nothing left open that could be closed. She did not think about the long acre. She thought about it every day. She had not done anything wrong. She had helped a man out of a ditch because he needed help, and she had kept his confidence because he asked her to, and she had been removed for knowing it. She could follow every step of the reasoning, and it did not make her less angry. Reasonable is not the same as right, and she had learned the difference early. In September, a letter came from her mother. It was 2 pages, mostly about her sister's baby and the state of the church roof, and at the bottom, in her mother's particular hand, 1 sentence that had been written and rewritten and was still not quite straight on the page. They say at the hiring fair that Mr. Crail is looking for a harvest ledger clerk for next season and asking after your father's work, and I did not know whether to tell you or not, but I have told you. Maren folded the letter and put it back in the envelope and did not answer that part of it. The harvest at Ashfeld came in on the 9th of September, 3 days late because of the August rain. The Duke rode out to the Long Acre on the morning of the 10th, which was a habit, a final inspection of a cleared field before the ploughing began. The stubble was cut even. The draining ditch at the edge had been cleared of the summer's growth. Everything was as it should be. At the far end, where the gate let onto the back lane, someone had taken the trouble to rehang the gate properly on its hinge, which had been dropping since June. It was a small thing. It was the kind of thing a man does who has worked a field and cannot leave it wrong. He knew who had done it, because she was the only one who had been in that end of the field alone, and because it was exactly the kind of thing he had noticed about her without meaning to. He stood at the gate for some time. When he came back to the house, he went to his study and sat at his desk and did not write anything for 20 minutes. Then he wrote a letter to Mr. Geddard, his solicitor in Aldwick, asking for the particulars of the hiring arrangement entered into at the August fair with a woman named Maren Coll, and particularly for whatever address had been provided. Geddard wrote back in 4 days. He was a precise man, and the letter was precise. Miss Coll had given no address. She was known at the fair as Edward Coll's daughter, of the village of Sterne. Her references were her father's years of service to the estate and the word of Mr. Parry the baker, who had known her since childhood. The Duke sat with that letter and thought about a woman who gave no address. He wrote to the baker. Mr. Parry of Sterne wrote back, being a man who saw no reason for mystery in a plain matter, that Maren Coll was in Carwick keeping accounts for a Mr. Drew on the market square, and that her mother would be grateful if someone in that quarter would tell her she was eating enough, as she had always been thin in the autumn. The Duke of Ashfeld was at the door of Drew's grain merchant on the 4th of October at 11 in the morning, alone, without his steward, without his groom, in a coat that was good but not formal, which was a decision. Maren Coll was at the counting desk in the back room, and she saw him through the open door before he saw her, and she sat for one moment and made a very exact decision about her own face. Then she got up and came to the counter. "Mr. Drew is not in until noon," she said. "I came to see you," said the Duke of Ashfeld. She looked at him. He looked as he had looked in the ditch, like a man deciding whether his pain was meaningful, except that the pain was different. "Then you may come through," she said, "and I will finish what I am doing while you say what you have come to say." He came through. She sat back down at the ledger. He stood on the other side of the desk and did not quite put his hat on it. "I sent you away," he said. "Before sunset," said Maren. "Yes, I gave Crail the order, without thinking past the first hour of it." "I know what you were thinking past," she said. "You were thinking past it very carefully. You were thinking that a girl who had seen a duke on his hands in a ditch was a problem, and that a problem is more easily moved than managed." He said nothing. "You were not wrong," she said, "about the arithmetic of it. You were only wrong about what it cost." "What did it cost?" She looked up from the ledger. "A month's wages, which you paid, 2 hours walking, and the thing I had done, which was worth nothing in the balance because nobody knew I had done it except you. You helped me out of a ditch," he said, "and I was removed so that nobody would know you needed help out of a ditch." She said it without heat. She had had 2 months for the heat to become something quieter. "It is a very usual arithmetic. I have only to be smaller than your embarrassment." I was. He sat down then, in the chair across from the desk, which she had not invited him to do, and which she did not object to. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes," said Maren. "I mean to make it right. What does that look like to you?" He looked at her, and she could see him lining up the expected sentence and deciding against it. There was something in his face that might have been the beginning of a different kind of honesty, the kind that costs. "I don't know yet," he said. "I know it is not wages." "No," she said, "it is not." She turned a page in the ledger. He sat and watched her work for 10 minutes in silence, which was the strangest 10 minutes she had ever spent in a professional capacity. "My father cut your harvest for 30 years, she said at last, without looking up. "I know. He was good at it." "I know that too. He died in March of 1821, and in March of 1822, your steward sent a letter to my mother saying the family would be considered at the spring hiring." She turned another page. "That was Mr. Crail, on your behalf, being decent. I have never forgotten it." He was quiet. "I am telling you that I know the difference," said Maren Coll, "between the man who sends that letter and the man who sends me off before sunset for knowing too much. And I think you know it too, or you would not be sitting in a grain merchant's back room in October telling me you do not know yet what right looks like." He picked up his hat and turned it over in his hands, which she recognized because she had seen the illustration of it from Mrs. Voss's account, and from her own mother's letter, and from the particular quality of silence he was producing right now. "There is a ledger position at Ashfeld," he said. "Estate accounts. Crail has wanted one for 3 years, and I have not got round to it. The wage is what the position is worth, which Gedard will tell you, and you may ask him yourself. It has nothing to do with the ditch, or the August, or any part of this conversation." She looked at him steadily. "Except that it does," she said. "Except that it does," he agreed. She closed the ledger. I will finish here at the end of October, she said, because I do not leave a thing half done. Mr. Drew will need a month to find someone, and he has been fair to me. November, then, he said. November, said Marin, and the wage goes through Gedard in writing before I set foot on that property. He nodded. One more thing, she said. Yes. The gate at the Long Acre end. The hinge has been dropping since June. A pause. It was rehung in September. I know, said Marin. I did it, but the pin is wrong for the post, and it will drop again by spring. Tell whoever sees to it to use a longer pin. He stood up. Is that the whole of it? He said. For today, said Marin Cole. She came to Ashfeld Park on the 3rd of November in a hired gig with her bundle and her father's Old Testament and the narrow account book she had kept in Carwick, which was hers, and which she brought because she had learned that a woman who keeps her own books is a woman no one can entirely mislead. Mrs. Voss received her at the kitchen door and looked at her hem and her boots and her hands, the same inspection as before, and at the end of it said, Your room is the one at the back with the east window. Breakfast is at 7. It was not an apology. It was something better. It was the acknowledgement that she was staying. The estate accounts were in the condition of a thing that has been managed by a capable man who hated the work. Mr. Crail was excellent in a field and approximate at a desk, and Marin found 17 months of approximations before Christmas, which she corrected without comment and presented to Gedard in January in a hand that he said afterwards was the clearest he had received from any source in 40 years of practice. She worked in the steward's room off the east corridor. She was not often in the house proper. She did not seek to be. On the 7th of December, she was carrying the rent book to Crail's office and passed the Duke in the West Passage. He was coming from the library. He stopped. The Hilling tenancy, he said. There is a discrepancy in what they were charged in March. They were overcharged 14 shillings, said Marin. It is a copying error from the previous ledger. I have corrected it and reduced the December figure accordingly. He looked at her. It had been 3 weeks since October, and she had seen him twice, and this was the 3rd time. You did not ask, he said. It was not mine to ask about. It was an error. I corrected it. Crail would have let it stand. Crail did not see it, said Marin. He does not read old ledgers. He trusts the current one. And you read the old ones. You cannot understand the current one without the old ones. That is the whole of accounting. He stood in the passage with his hands in his coat pockets and said nothing for a moment. The Hillings have been on that farm since before my grandfather, he said. I know, said Marin. I could tell that from the ledger. How? She considered how to say it plainly. The way the rent is noted. Crail writes Hilling, North Farm. Your father's steward wrote Thomas Hilling, North Farm, as his father before him. It is a different kind of knowing. It says something about what the man at the desk thought he was doing. He was quiet for a moment. What do you think you are doing? He said. She shifted the rent book to her other arm. I think I am keeping a record of what this estate is worth, she said. Not only in money, in what it owes, and what it is owed, and what it has promised, and what it has kept. That is what a ledger is, if it is done properly. Most people only do the money part. He was looking at her in the way she had seen him look at the Long Acre gate in October. It was not a comfortable look to receive. It had no performance in it. My father's steward kept it that way, he said. He was very old, said Marin. He learned it from someone who thought an estate was a living thing. And you think so too. She looked at him directly, because she had decided sometime in November that she was finished with looking away from things. My father cut this harvest for 30 years, she said. He talked about every field by name. He talked about the long acre, the way you talk about a person. He said it had a temper in wet years. She paused. I think that is a reasonable way to know a piece of land. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, There is a thing I have not said. There are several, said Maren. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. August, he said. Yes, she said. I have thought about it every day since October. Good, said Maren Cole. You are not going to make it easy. No, she said. I did that once. I made it easy for you to send me away, because I said yes, ma'am, to your housekeeper in a kitchen yard and walked to the coach office with my wages. I am not going to make a habit of it. What do you want? He said. Not the ledger. Not the wage. What do you want? It was the kind of question she had not been asked in that form before. She thought about it carefully, because she was not a woman who answered the wrong question just because it was waiting. I want, she said, to be asked. When a thing concerns me, to be in the room when it is decided. He said nothing. My father was a good man, said Maren. He worked this land honestly for 30 years, and he was never in a room where anything was decided. He did not mind it. I do mind it. That is the difference between us, and it is not a fault in him. It is not a fault in you either, said the Duke. No, said Maren, it is not. It snowed on the 21st of December, the first real snow, the kind that changes the sound of a house. Maren was in the steward's room at 7 in the evening, finishing the quarter accounts, when Mrs. Voss knocked and said that Her Grace, Lady Cora, the Duke's aunt who came for Christmas, and whose arrival had been discussed in the kitchen for 2 weeks, had asked for the household books. Maren said she would bring them. Lady Cora Ashfeld was 70, and had been managing the family's affairs in the Duke's father's time and his grandfather's time, and did not believe in letting go of anything that was useful to hold. She sat by the fire in the blue room, with a straight back and a face like a winter field, flat and clear and very hard to read. She looked at Maren in the doorway. Put the books on the table, she said, and sit down. Not there. There, where I can see your face in the light. Maren sat. Lady Cora opened the accounts and read 3 pages without speaking. These are very good, she said. Thank you, Your Grace. They are better than Crayle's. Mr. Crayle is better in the field, said Maren. We do different things. The old woman turned another page. He has told me about the ditch. Maren said nothing. He told it as a confession, said Lady Cora. I have heard a great many confessions. His was not the worst I have received, which I told him, and which did not make him feel better, which was the point. She closed the account book. You walked to the coach in 2 hours, and found a position in a week. Yes, Your Grace. Where did you learn the accounts? My father taught me to read the ledger when I was 8. He said if I knew what the estate earned, I would know what it was worth. He was right. The old woman looked at her steadily. Do you know what you are worth, Miss Cole? It was a general's question. Maren recognized it. I know what I can do, she said. That is the same thing, I think. Lady Cora made a sound that was not quite a laugh and was not quite approval, but was something in between. My nephew, she said, has the habit of men who are accustomed to deciding things quietly and alone. His father had it. His grandfather had it. It is not a vice. It is a very old way of being responsible for a great deal, and it does enormous harm to everyone within its radius. She folded her hands. He is not going to know how to ask you for anything. He has made a start, said Marin. The old woman raised her eyebrows. In the passage last week, said Marin, he asked what I wanted. He meant it. A pause. And what did you tell him? That I wanted to be in the room. Lady Cora looked at her for a long time. Then she reached for the account book again. Then you had better be in more rooms, she said. I shall see to it. Not for him. He has enough people doing things for him. For myself. I am very old, and I have not had a conversation of this quality since my solicitor retired in 1818. She opened the book. We shall go through these together. You will explain the Hilling correction to me. I have been waiting 40 years to catch someone overcharging the Hillings. The Duke found them still at it at 10 o'clock, the fire gone low, and both of them with candles and the account books open between them, his aunt asking sharp questions and the girl answering every one without a pause. He stood in the doorway. The Pinner grazing charge, said Lady Cora, without looking up, has been wrong since your grandfather's time. Miss Coll has found it. Has she? He said. 60 years of overcharge, which I am not suggesting we attempt to correct, as the Pinners are all dead, but the principle stands. The old woman looked up at last. Come in or go away, Jasper. There is a draught. He came in. He sat in the third chair, the one by the window, outside the circle of lamplight. He did not speak. Marin did not look at him. She went on explaining the grazing charge to Lady Cora in the same voice she had used before he entered, which was steady and clear and gave him nothing to read in it. But she was aware of him in the particular way she had been aware of the gate at the Long Acre, the way you are aware of something that is wrong and then is made right and changes the whole feel of the thing you are looking at. They finished the accounts at 10:30. Lady Cora closed the last book and looked at the fire for a moment. Your father's name was Edward, she said to Marin. Yes, Your Grace. I remember him. He had a way of leaving a field very neat. She rose, and they both rose with her. I shall say good night. Miss Coll, you will come to me at 9 tomorrow. I have the household accounts from 1800, and I suspect they have been wrong since before that. She went out. The door closed. Marin began gathering the account books. The room was quiet. The snow outside made it quieter. She likes you, said the Duke. She likes the accounts, said Marin. She likes you. She asked you to come back at 9. He moved from the window. She has not asked anyone to come back at 9 since Geddard's father. Marin straightened the stack of books. That is because the accounts are genuinely incorrect, she said. It is not personal. Everything my aunt does is personal. He was on the other side of the table now. The lamp was between them. She does not waste time on people. She does not mean to keep. Marin looked at him across the lamp. What are you trying to say? She said, in plain words. He was quiet for a moment, the way he had been quiet in the passage. The way she had come to understand meant he was deciding whether to be a duke about something or a person. I sent you away before the harvest was in, he said. I have thought about nothing else since October. Not the accounts, not the ditch, the harvest. He looked at her directly. You finished the fallen stalks in the Long Acre alone, after everyone else had gone in. I know that, because I read the field notes from that week. You were in that field 3 hours past the others. You did not note it. You did not add it to your hours. It needed doing, said Marin. You were sent away a week before the harvest came in, he said. You finished a field for me 3 hours past anyone else's account, and I sent you away before the corn was in." She said nothing. There was nothing to say that was not already in the room. "I want you to stay," he said. It was not a graceful sentence. It had the sound of a thing said by someone who had rehearsed nothing and was therefore telling the truth. Not the ledger. The ledger can go to the devil. I want you to stay. Maren Coll stood on the other side of the lamp in a duke's house in December, in the narrow quiet of a snowbound evening, and thought about a gate with a wrong pin, and a ditch in the Long Acre, and a letter in a testament, and a door left open in Carwick that she had never fully closed. "Ask me then," she said. "Properly, with all of it in it," he asked her. It took longer than the first version he had started with. She could see him setting aside the formal shape of it, the expected shape, and finding underneath it the actual thing he meant. When he found it, his voice changed. It became quieter. It became, she thought, true. "Yes," said Maren Coll. They were married in the church at Stern on the 14th of February, because Lady Cora said February was underused as a month, and she was tired of everyone clustering at the sensible times of year. The banns were read 3 Sundays running, and on the 3rd Sunday, Maren stood up in the pew to hear them, because she had never in her life sat still for a thing that was happening to her, and she did not intend to begin now. The harvest ledger from the year of her father's last season was found at the back of the estate room in March, and she spent 3 evenings reading it. His name was in it 17 times, in the old steward's hand, with a note beside each entry that was not strictly necessary and had no accounting function, small observations about the work, the weather, the particular quality of a given field. Coll, Long Acre, fair, 6 days, 3 stayed late. Good man, knows the land. She closed the ledger and put it back on the shelf, and stood in the estate room for a while in the late March light. Then she went down to the Long Acre and walked it to the far gate, which had been rehung in September with a longer pin on her instructions, and which sat perfectly level on its post and did not drop at all. She stood at the gate with her hand on the wood, the same wood her father had come through every August for 30 years, and felt the solid, true weight of a thing made right. Behind her, across the field, she heard a horse come through the upper gate, at a walk, careful of the soft ground at the edge of the drainage ditch, the way you walk a horse when you have learned, once, to be careful. She did not turn around. He came up beside her and stopped and looked at the gate. "Longer pin," he said. "Longer pin," said Maren. They stood at the gate of the Long Acre in the first green of a March morning, on land that had known her father's name for 30 years and did not need to say anything else. Some things are kept in the field, not in the ledger, and she had learned early and exactly which was which. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Tell us what the story made you feel and where you are watching from. If you do not want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel.